Pests beware, your fields have heroes. The Pests and Predators podcast is brought to you by Field Heroes and is powered by the Western Grains Research Foundation. Learn how beneficial insects fight pests and protect your crops. Visit fieldheroes.ca today.
Big announcement from Farm Credit Canada this week. Here to chat about the significance of it and where the money's going to go. It is Darren Baccus, Executive VP of Agri-Food and Alliances at FCC Capital. Darren, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Sean. Great to be here.
Okay, give us the details here. What is FCC announcing this week?
So FCC, we're thrilled to announce that we are committing $2 billion of new capital solutions into the food and ag industry, particularly focused on innovation. So ag tech, if you will. $2 billion, exactly. This is going to be looked to be deployed over 5 years. And Sean, this has been part of the strategy that we at FCC have been launching over the last couple of years based upon the engagement and discussions with the industry, right? This is what we heard from the industry is needed and wanted.
Now, what has changed FCC in your risk appetite or the mandate from the government that would allow you to put this significant amount of capital into the market?
Yeah, so good question. So the mandate remains the same as has always been, which is to enhance the Canadian food and ag industry. And so you and your listeners are well aware that FCC has been a stable force in food and ag for decades, providing capital solutions to primary producers. And so over the last couple of years, as we've been thinking about how FCC can continue to support the industry, we went out there and talked to the industry. And what we heard from the industry was, we need more diversity of capital solutions. Your senior lending to primary ag, agri-food, agribusiness has been very supportive, right? The capital solutions you have provided in the livestock industry and the input financing, very supportive. But as productivity has continued to be a challenge, FCC, you are uniquely positioned to be able to provide capital in different areas to drive innovation, drive efficiencies, and increase this productivity. So we at FCC looked and said, you know what, this is our mandate. This is part of our mandate. This is what the industry is asking us to do. And you're correct. We said we need to make, you will notice, Sean, is that we've been thinking about this for a couple of years. And so what we've gone out and done is we've ensured that we have built the necessary controls, governance, risk protocols, and the like to be able to deploy this type of capital, again, all within our mandate to support the industry.
Is there demand in the marketplace for $2 billion on top of what's already available out there?
So we strongly believe that there is demand, and there's a couple different ways to think about this. So first of all, intentionally over a 5-year time period. This is not going out there and shotgunning the money indiscriminately out. Number two is we see a robust set of investors, entrepreneurs that may not be thinking about food and ag as their primary place. So there are generalists out there, successful serial entrepreneurs, investors who have an investable universe that has different sectors, where they can come and they say, actually, hey, FCC is providing an opportunity to crowd in capital, to crowd in entrepreneurs into food and ag. And so, yes, something that's unique, as you well know, John, about Farm Credit Canada is we have a specific industry, right? Unlike other BDC, EDC, and the like, who play very integral roles in the Canadian economy, they're generalists. We are specialists for food and ag. So, this strategy, we heard from the industry, we did a diagnostic. There is need, there is opportunity.
Yeah, you mentioned the crowd in. How do you specifically measure success in achieving that? Like, what are some of the KPIs or benchmarks? Because I know you've thought about this, that you're going to be using to ensure FCC isn't just replacing capital that it might have been coming into the market anyway.
Yeah. So not going down the rabbit hole, which will be in our annual report and the like. So very transparent about the KPIs and the thing. There's a couple things that we think about, Sean. And so one is we will not lead transactions, right? We think our role is to be a supporter from a capital perspective and from a value add perspective, but to bring in other investors to lead those transactions alongside of us. And so we think that's very important there. So to not be that individual that is leading the transaction and creating it and becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will. And so the second thing is from a value creation perspective. So it's not just the deployment of the capital. It is how can we increase the likelihood of success, or I'll frame it a different. How do we increase the likelihood that these innovations actually get onto the acres, right? Which is where our primary producers need to access that innovation so that they can increase productivity. And that's something that's important for us to continue to measure, right? Either whether through Ag Expert, which I think you know is
Yep.
our in-house farm services and financial software system. It's also through our innovation farms, which are 6 farms, 12,000 acres across 4 provinces, where we are actually able to test these innovations and the like. And so, yeah, definitely a rigorous measurement system to understand, are we having the impact we expect, so that we can pivot as we need to over this time period.
Yeah, I spent quite a bit of time last year looking at this, this Canadian ag tech ecosystem. That some of that work was supported definitely by FCC. I learned a lot, and one of the things that stuck with me is we don't have a startup problem. We have this so-called like valley of death for a lot of innovators between startup and like scaling. Is this an area that you're going to be focusing on?
Definitely, definitely. I'll echo your observation, right? There is a large number of incredible entrepreneurs in Canada, in particular in the food and ag system. There is capital available for them to get up. Uh, I would say that our ecosystem has an opportunity to continue to support each other and grow as we're building that. But that handoff to allow that entrepreneur to build and grow past the various stages and get escape velocity, or as you said, the valley of death, right, to get through that. We think there's an opportunity there to not only bring capital there, which is a focus of ours, but also to crowd in other investors. And in particular, not just investors that today, Sean, are thinking about food and ag, but experienced long track record investors today that are experiencing getting companies across different industries through that valley of death. And what we can bring to them is, hey, you have a ton of experience helping companies through that valley of death in a diversity of industries. How can we, Farm Credit Canada, bring you into food and ag? And you help us help the industry and these companies get through, because we echo your observation.
Are you doing this directly, or is a portion of this going to be through third-party funders as well?
A portion will be through third-party funders. As I mentioned, a portion will be direct, but that's going to be alongside of other investors. And with the third-party funders, it's interesting. I appreciate you didn't use the word funds, because that's intentional for us when we did our strategy and talked to the industry. Was we may make some, and we probably will make some fund investments, so more traditional. But what we heard was the food and ag industry also needs innovation in how capital is brought into the industry. So yes, it might be a traditional fund with a lifespan and a structure that the industry is used to, but it may be something, and we hope it's something novel or multiple novel, where people come in and say, oh, like the way that inputs actually work from a timing and a growing season, bringing an idea that worked for fintech structurally won't work here, because fintech, you think, as you know, you think quarter over quarter. Our customers think growing seasons. And so we will need innovation in the funders. So it may not be funds, but the funders. But yeah, some direct and some through these structures.
What kind of innovations, or like, I guess, where's the focus here? Like what's investable? Kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So from the investable universe, right? Like we start by saying, does this have the opportunity to enhance the Canadian food and ag industry? And by enhance, that has a definition that is very broad, but if we take it right down to the soil, right? Can this drive productivity? Can this drive efficiencies? Can this take away some of the worries that our primary producers, one of the many worries that our primary producers have? And so you think about, it can be everything from research through to robotics, through to implementation of technologies, through to processes that can add efficiencies. It's a very wide aperture. And I come back to that piece of, you know, the privilege we have of serving one industry means that as we think about those various topics, we at Farm Credit Canada have in-house expertise to think about those topics, but more importantly, Sean, have relationships within the industry where when something pops up, we look and say, oh, it's a shiny object. But we can talk to primary producers that are in oil seeds or whatever it may be brought about, like, and say, okay, give us a gut call on this. Would this work and the like? And that's why, hopefully, you know, this picture is sort of forming. We think that the dollar amount is important because we think that's the right number based upon our diagnostic and our discussions with the industry. And we also know that it is sufficient. We think it is sufficient to bring in these other investors that we discussed and also catalyze these innovations, many of which will, you know, pop up and we can give feedback on in early stages and bring along. So it's a wide aperture.
Yeah, fascinating. Now, is this meant for Canadian-based innovations, or are we also looking at maybe the founder was from, I don't know, Louisiana, and they're looking to enter the Canadian market, but they need some fund, you know, they need some investment to do so. Does that qualify as well?
So primarily this is Canadian focused, but we also recognize, you know, we as Canadians are blessed with so much abundance of primary production, water, you know, natural resources that just support our food and ag system. And as we were doing our diagnostic and thinking about this strategy, you nailed it, Sean. We heard from innovators in other places, in particular places that are constrained by land. Japan, as an example, our friends in the Netherlands who are thinking about greenhouses because they have to think about greenhouses. You mentioned somebody in Louisiana. Well, they're thinking about innovation, but they're also thinking about adverse climate events that are forcing them. And so those innovators, and frankly, sometimes those younger innovators are saying, wait a second, I wonder if I can bring my innovation to somewhere else, to Canada. Australia is too far. To Canada and bring it up there. And so we're open to that. We're very mindful of our mandate, Sean, though, which is enhancing Canadian food and ag, but importing innovation that will make a difference to the industry. I think we have to think about that.
Now, Darren, one of the things that, you know, we did some of those roundtables last year that, you know, also stuck with me is that there are a lot of really bright innovators. They have got great ideas. Maybe it's an academic background, maybe it's a practical background, but they have something and they own some IP and there's some potential. There's the investment part, the venture capital part that we've been talking about, but there's also the tutelage, the mentoring, the learning the CEO skills, so to speak. Is it programming for that to help founders with that? Is that outside this mandate, or is that included here?
That's definitely within the mandate.
Okay.
Right. The engagement. So the roundtables you referenced resonated with us as well, as did the discussions as we were thinking about this strategy, which is capital alone does not increase the chance of success or exponentially. Sorry.
Right.
Capital is, hey, Sean, here's some money. Good luck in your garage. And so part of what we are doing as well, and which FCC has done throughout its history, is providing advisory support services to our customers. Here, mindful that these are new types of capital solutions and going into different places within the industry and in the life cycle of a company, we're also expanding this value creation services, right? We need to be able to help that Lethbridge, as an example, entrepreneur who is wondering, does she need a full CFO or a part-time CFO? Like just things that in Silicon Valley, as they went through fintech and the like, that was that ecosystem that helped bring it along. It wasn't just the money. And we can't do this alone, right? We are encouraging the industry members, helping to convene them to bring that. But that's part of that ecosystem. And I really appreciate you commenting on that valley of death, because it's not just capital that takes a company through that valley of death. It's the support, it's the tutelage, right? It's the midnight calls of saying, you know, hey, Sean, is this normal? How do I think about that? Like the Canadian food and ag industry has these people to support the entrepreneurs and bringing them along. You know, we're just grateful to be able to convene and connect.
Now, we know in VC work, they're not all successes. You know, that's the math just proves that. So how do you deal with failure in the fact that, you know, FCC is a crown corporation? There's a lot of smart people with VC backgrounds on your team. I've met a number of them. So there's some smart people in the room here. But even with the smartest people in the room, there's going to be some investments that they just don't work out because for whatever reason. Okay, there's a lot of different variables that come into play. How do you plan, or what's your messaging around that when failure happens?
Yeah. So a few things that build off of that. So number one is ensuring that the underwriting, so that the triage and the understanding of each investment opportunity is not forgotten. And when an investment hits a challenge and the like, we always look back and we say, was that a risk that was expected? Is it playing out as we expected? Could we have done more to mitigate it and learn from it, right? You have to learn from failure. And at the risk of sounding like a self-help investment book,
Yeah.
right? Like it's we need to learn. And again, the scope of this ambitious announcement, we believe will allow us, even with the failures, which you so well described, we'll now have a central point of visibility on the failures and can pull out from that themes and understanding. And look, maybe we have 5 failures in a specific area. All of a sudden you have FCC that can look and say, hey, just calling out to the industry, letting you know these 5 companies across 5 different provinces all failed for a similar reason. Let's all get together and understand how that happened and why that happened, and should we be evolving that. One last thought, which again you will have heard in many different areas, which is the fail fast.
Yeah.
Which is that understanding, and entrepreneurs, our experience, particularly on the innovation farms, where we've brought innovators on to talk with primary producers. And again, primary producers, they're not ones to say, oh, that looks like a good idea. Like they tell it as it is. And we need to do more of that, right? Bring these innovators sitting in Waterloo that think may have this great idea, and put them in front of the primary producers to actually say, you know what? I like this. Or Sean, you know what? Have you been on a farm? Because I'm not sure that's going to work.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we heard, and we're going to be talking more about this in the future, but for a lot of innovators and founders, one of their struggles is trying to get in contact or find farmers to talk to do some of the testing. So your point is well taken there. It doesn't make sense to me, but I know a lot of farmers, and if I'm coming from maybe an academic background, I don't, right? So I want to wrap up with this. We talked about failure, but let's talk about success. What does success look like? Is it the $1 billion exit that a lot of founders talk about, or is it a whole bunch of companies that employ 20 people? And I know there's a lot of things in between there too, but what does success look like?
Sean, I'm going to take this even up a level. So success is when Canadians like you and I and all of our customers are traveling globally. Today, they look and they say, hey, Sean, you're from Canada. We should talk about hockey. We should talk about poutine. We should talk about oil and gas. They should be saying, oh, you're from the breadbasket of the world. That's what success is. And this program is just part of it, pushing us towards that.
We've been talking to Darren Baccus, Executive VP, Agri-Food Alliances at FCC Capital. Big announcement, $2 billion going to be invested in Canadian ag innovation in the next 2 years. Darren, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Sean.